I've worked as an electrician for 16 years. I've rewired burned-out kitchens. I've fixed flood-damaged breaker panels. I've crawled through insulation so thick it felt like breathing through cotton. I've seen illegal wiring jobs that should have killed someone, but nothing I've seen on a job ever compared to what I found inside my own home. My wife, Nora, and I moved to northern Arizona about 4 months ago. High desert, quiet, isolated, the kind of place where your nearest neighbor is half a mile away, and at night the only sounds you hear are wind and distant coyotes. We didn't have kids, just the two of us, and our German shepherd, Atlas. The house was bigger than we needed. That should have been the first red flag. 4 bedrooms, 2 stories, full basement, detached garage, nearly 5 acres of land, and the price, too good. The realtor told us the previous owners were motivated. People get motivated for a lot of reasons. Divorce, debt, illness. We didn't ask which one. We just signed. The first few weeks felt peaceful. Nora loved it immediately. She'd always hated city noise. Out here, the silence felt clean. Atlas adjusted quickly, too. He had room to run. I handled small repairs, replaced a few fixtures, rewired an outlet in the kitchen. Normal stuff. Then small things started happening. Nothing dramatic. Just subtle. I'd leave a pair of pliers on the counter and find them in the laundry room. A cabinet we never used would sometimes be slightly open. The basement door wouldn't latch properly once or twice, even though I was sure I'd shut it. Nora blamed stress. Moving does that to people. I blamed memory. New house, new routine. We moved on. About 6 weeks in, the upstairs breaker started tripping. Only the upstairs. The rest of the house stayed powered. That annoyed me more than it worried me. Electrical problems are logical. They follow rules. I told Nora I'd check it. The basement was unfinished but mostly empty, aside from a few old wooden chairs the previous owners had left behind. I remember thinking it smelled colder down there. Not damp, just colder. Like the air didn't circulate properly. I found the breaker panel quickly. The upstairs circuit was overloaded. It would need to be redistributed. Simple fix. I was about to head back upstairs when something caught my eye. Behind the stack of chairs, partially hidden in shadow, was a metal door. Not a normal interior door. Industrial. Thick steel. Matte gray. Heavy hinges. Reinforced frame bolted into concrete. It didn't belong in a residential basement. I stared at it, trying to remember the showing. The realtor never mentioned it. I stepped closer. The handle was solid, cold to the touch. I tried turning it. Locked. The lock mechanism wasn't standard either. It looked layered, reinforced, almost commercial grade. Overkill for a storm shelter. Upstairs, I searched through the folder of keys the previous owners had left. Garage keys, shed keys, 2 front door spares, even a tiny key labeled utility. None fit. I called our realtor and asked for the previous owner's contact information. A man answered. He sounded older than I expected. Tired. I introduced myself and asked about the metal door in the basement. There was a long pause, the kind where you can hear someone thinking. "It's just a storm room," he finally said. "Ordered for tornadoes." His voice didn't match his words. "It's locked," I told him. "Do you have the key?" Another pause. "We misplaced it before we left." "That's a pretty important key to lose." Silence again, then quieter. "You won't need it." I waited. He didn't elaborate. "Best to leave it closed," he added. And then he ended the call. That night, I couldn't sleep. Atlas paced near the bedroom door around 2 a.m., ears raised, listening. I told myself it was coyotes, wind, old house settling, but the next morning, something changed. The exterior cellar doors, the angled wooden doors outside that led into the basement, were slightly open. I was positive I hadn't touched them since we moved in. I walked down the steps and checked the latch. It looked worn, recently worn. I closed them and locked them tight. That was the first moment I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not yet, just awareness. Curiosity doesn't fade, it grows. A week later, I hired a locksmith. His name was Ray. Mid-40s, quiet guy, efficient. When he saw the metal door, he frowned immediately. "That's not residential," he said. "What do you mean?" "Lock systems layered, internal bolts, custom job. Someone spent money on this." "For a storm room?" He didn't answer. It took him nearly an hour to crack it. When the final mechanism released, the sound echoed through the basement. Heavy, final. Ray pulled the door open, and the smell hit us first. Stale air, rot, like something sealed too long. The room inside was about 12 by 14 feet. Concrete walls, no windows, but it wasn't empty. The walls were covered in photographs, black and white, dozens of them. Pinned, taped, layered, and every single face in every photo had been marked. Circles drawn around heads, lines slashed through eyes, symbols carved in black ink. In the center of the room sat a wooden chair, facing the wall, not the door. The wall, as if someone had spent hours sitting there, staring at nothing. In the corner was a cot, blankets crumpled, plastic water bottles scattered on the floor. Not dusty, not old. Recent. Ray stepped back slowly. "You didn't know about this?" he asked. I shook my head. Then I saw something else. On the far right wall, partially hidden in shadow, was a second door. Smaller, narrow. I walked toward it and opened it. Behind it was a staircase, narrow wooden steps leading upward, not to the main basement, to the exterior cellar entrance, completely separate from the rest of the house. Someone could enter and leave without ever stepping inside our home. My stomach dropped. The missing tools, the open cabinets. Atlas, staring at the basement door. Someone hadn't lived here before. Someone had been living here while we did. Ray didn't say anything else. He just packed his tools. "I'd call the police," he muttered, and then he left, leaving the metal door wide open, and me, standing there alone. I stood in that basement for almost 5 full minutes after Ray left. The metal door remained open behind me. The room felt different now that it wasn't sealed. Not abandoned, not old, occupied, like someone had stepped out minutes earlier. I forced myself to walk back inside. The smell was stronger the second time. Stale sweat, plastic, breath. The photographs covered nearly every inch of the concrete walls. They weren't random magazine cutouts like I'd first assumed. They were surveillance photos, taken from a distance, zoomed, angles from the tree line behind the house, angles from the driveway, angles from inside the garage. My chest tightened. I stepped closer. One of the photos showed Nora unloading groceries. Another showed me standing in the yard with Atlas. One showed our bedroom window at night, light on inside. These weren't from before we moved in. They were recent. Very recent. My hands started shaking. Someone had been watching us. Not casually, systematically. I called 911 from the basement. I didn't trust my voice enough to go upstairs first. 2 deputies arrived about 25 minutes later. Rural response time. They stepped into the basement and immediately went quiet. One of them, a woman in her early 30s, and pulled on gloves and began photographing the room. The other walked the perimeter. "Sir," he said carefully, "when did you discover this?" "About an hour ago." "You didn't know this was here when you purchased the property?" "No." They examined the cot, the bottles, the trash in a small plastic bin near the chair. One deputy crouched down and picked up a water bottle. "There's still condensation residue," she said. "How recent?" I asked. She hesitated. "Couple weeks, maybe less." The words hit harder than I expected. "Less?" She nodded. "You said you've been here 4 months." "Yes." She exchanged a look with her partner. Neither of them liked what that meant. I showed them the narrow staircase leading to the cellar entrance. They followed it up. The exterior doors were locked. I'd secured them that morning. But when the deputy examined the wood near the latch, he frowned. "See this? Fresh scratch marks near the metal bracket. Someone's been using this regularly." My mouth went dry. "While we were here." He didn't answer directly, but he didn't need to. Back inside the hidden room, the female deputy began removing some of the photographs from the wall. She peeled one carefully from the concrete. "Sir," she said quietly. I stepped closer. It was me, standing in the kitchen, taken from outside the window. The date stamp in the corner was from 3 weeks ago. Another photo. Nora, asleep on the couch, lights off, taken from outside the glass sliding door. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't a squatter. This was surveillance. "Do you have security cameras?" the deputy asked. "Not yet." She nodded. "You need them." They filed a report, took several photos and a few bottles as evidence, promised extra patrols. And then they left. Just like that, the house returned to silence. But it wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt observed. Nora came downstairs once the deputies were gone. I hadn't shown her everything earlier. Now I had to. She stood frozen in the doorway of that metal room. When she saw the photographs of us on the walls, she covered her mouth. "He's been inside," she whispered. I didn't answer, because I was starting to realize something worse. Some of the photos weren't taken from outside. A few angles were too precise, too centered. One of them showed our hallway from shoulder height, from inside the house. We locked every door, checked every window twice. I moved a heavy tool chest in front of the metal room door, chained and padlocked the cellar entrance outside, set up a temporary motion camera in the hallway using equipment from a previous job. Atlas refused to settle. He paced, low growls under his breath. At 1:43 a.m., we heard it. A soft thud, basement direction. Nora grabbed my arm. "You heard that, right?" I nodded. Another sound followed, metal shifting, like pressure against steel. My heart began pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed. Slowly, carefully, I moved toward the stairs. The house was completely dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I listened. Halfway down the stairs, I heard it again. A slow scraping sound, from the direction of the metal door. The tool chest. Something was pushing against it. From the other side. That wasn't possible. The room had been cleared. The deputies had checked it. I took one more step down. The scraping grew louder. Deliberate, controlled, not frantic, like someone testing the weight of the obstruction. My breathing became shallow. Then, silence. Complete silence. I stood frozen, waiting. Nothing. After nearly 30 seconds, I forced myself to move. I reached the bottom step and shined my flashlight toward the metal door. The tool chest had shifted. 2 inches, dragged slightly to the left. Something had pushed it. From inside. Nora's voice called from upstairs. "Call the police." I didn't argue. I backed up slowly and dialed. The deputies arrived faster this time. Weapons drawn. They moved the tool chest, opened the metal door. The room was empty. Completely empty. The cot was gone. The bottles were gone. The trash was gone. The photographs were gone. The concrete walls were bare. No tape residue. No holes, no marks. Just smooth gray surface. One deputy turned to me. "Sir, are you absolutely certain this is the same room?" I stared at the blank wall. "Yes." They checked the staircase to the cellar. The chain I'd installed had been cut clean through. Professional cut. Not broken, not forced. Cut. They searched the property. Tree line, garage, under the porch. Nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks. No sign of forced entry anywhere else. When they finally left again, I felt worse than before, because now I understood something. Whoever had been there wasn't panicking. They were calm, prepared, and close enough to return. At 3:58 a.m., my phone vibrated. Motion detected. Hallway camera. I opened the app immediately. The clip was 12 seconds long. The hallway appeared empty at first, and then, at the very edge of the frame, a shadow moved, human height, shoulders distinct, head shape visible. It passed slowly across the wall near our bedroom door, blocking light as it moved, then disappeared out of frame. My blood turned to ice, because that camera was upstairs, far from the basement, which meant one thing. The person beneath our house had already been inside. I watched the hallway footage at least 20 times. Each time I convinced myself it had to be a trick of the light. Compression artifact, camera glitch, auto exposure shift. But I install surveillance systems for a living. I know what glitches look like. This wasn't one. The shadow had depth. It interrupted the light from the bathroom nightlight as it passed. Something physical had moved through that hallway, and it had moved slowly. Not running, not sneaking, but walking, like it belonged there. At sunrise, I checked every door and window again. Still locked. No damage, no pry marks, nothing disturbed. If someone had entered the house, they hadn't forced their way in, which left two options. 1. They had a key. 2. They never left. The second option made my stomach turn. I grabbed a flashlight and started searching the house again. Closets, crawl spaces, under sinks, inside the garage attic. Nothing. Then Atlas did something he hadn't done before. He stood beneath the ceiling in the upstairs hallway and began growling. Not at the walls, at the ceiling. The attic access hatch was in that same hallway. I pulled the cord and lowered the folding ladder. Dust drifted down as the hatch opened. The air above felt warmer than it should have. I climbed up with the flashlight. Insulation. Beams. Standard layout. Then I saw it. A clear disturbance in the insulation. Not random. A path. Compressed in a line across the attic floor, as if someone had crawled through, repeatedly. My throat tightened. I followed the path, carefully. It led toward the section of the attic directly above the basement, above the metal room. There, partially hidden beneath loose insulation, was a wooden panel. It didn't match the surrounding structure. The wood was newer. The screws were newer. Someone had installed it recently. I unscrewed the panel slowly. Each turn felt louder than it should have. When I lifted it away, I found a narrow vertical shaft, not part of the original design, a hidden drop space between interior walls, wide enough for a thin adult to slide through. It ran downward, toward the basement, a secondary access point, like invisible from inside the house, invisible from the metal room, a concealed route. My pulse pounded in my ears. Whoever had built this knew exactly what they were doing. I climbed down and went straight to my office. I pulled up the county's archived blueprints for the house. Original 1989 layout. I compared the structural drawings to what I'd just seen. The wall cavity I'd found wasn't original. It had been modified. The metal room wasn't original either. It had been added later. Legally, there was no permit on record, which meant someone had done all of this quietly, deliberately. The previous owners hadn't just misplaced a key. They had built something and then left it behind. The attic shaft explained everything. The hallway shadow, the missing items, the tool chest shifting. And someone had been moving between the exterior cellar entrance, the hidden metal room, the attic, the interior hallway, without ever using the main doors. A closed system, designed for concealment. But one question refused to leave my mind. If the room had been cleared, if the cot and photos were gone, where had they gone? There wasn't enough time between the noise and the police arrival for someone to pack everything and escape unnoticed. Unless they never left the house at all. That night we didn't sleep. I stayed awake in the hallway chair with a bat across my knees. Atlas lay beside me. At 2:17 a.m. I heard it. A faint shifting sound above us, not random creaking. Movement, slow pressure across wooden beams, directly overhead. Atlas stood instantly, his ears flattened. The sound stopped. We waited. 30 seconds passed. Then, a soft thud inside the wall. Not above, inside, like weight transferring downward, toward the hidden shaft. I moved carefully toward the hallway wall where I'd found the attic panel. I pressed my ear against the drywall. At first, nothing. Then, breathing. Slow, controlled, on the other side of the wall, close enough that I could hear the faint rasp of air. My entire body locked up. There was someone inside the wall cavity, between the attic and the basement, listening to us. I stepped back slowly. The breathing stopped. Absolute silence. Then a whisper, so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it. "Don't!" One word, from inside the wall. Nora gasped behind me. She'd heard it too. Something shifted violently inside the wall. A loud crack, wood splintering, then rapid movement upward, scrambling. The attic beams shook. I bolted for the ladder and climbed up, flashlight sweeping wildly. Insulation exploded outward near the panel. The wooden cover had been kicked aside from below. The shaft was empty, but the insulation path now led in the opposite direction. Toward the far end of the attic, toward the vent exit above the garage. By the time I reached it, I heard the metallic clang of the exterior vent cover hitting the driveway outside. He had escaped. Again. I ran outside barefoot, cold gravel cutting into my feet. I rounded the garage just in time to see a figure disappearing into the tree line. Tall, thin, moving fast, not limping, not desperate, controlled, like he'd practiced that route. I wanted to chase him, but I stopped, because that's what he would expect. Instead, I called the police again. When deputies arrived, I showed them the attic shaft, the modified structure, the vent exit. This time their tone changed. This wasn't a squatter. This was engineering, planning, long-term occupation. One deputy asked a question I hadn't fully considered. Did the previous owners have children? No, I said. Why? He hesitated. Because whoever built this knew the house's structure intimately, which meant one of two things. Either the previous owners built it, or someone had been living here long before they sold it, and they knew about him. That night, as patrol vehicles idled outside, I realized something terrifying. The man beneath our house hadn't panicked. He hadn't attacked. He hadn't stolen valuables. He had observed, watched, documented, moved silently within the structure, like he wasn't hiding from us, but studying us. And now that we'd discovered his roots, he had finally revealed himself. After the attic escape, the deputies didn't treat this like a trespassing complaint anymore. They treated it like a manhunt. 2 additional patrol units canvassed the tree line behind our property until sunrise. K-9 units were requested, but would take hours to arrive from the nearest city. They never found him. No footprints, no discarded items, no camp. It was as if the desert swallowed him whole. But this time something was different. He'd been seen. That made him real to everyone else, not just to us. The next morning, a detective contacted me. Detective Harris, late 40s, calm voice, methodical. He asked for a complete timeline, when we moved in, when we first noticed odd activity, when we discovered the room, when the attic access was found. Then he asked about the previous owners again. Did they seem eager to sell? Yes. Did they disclose the storm room in writing? No. That got his attention. Because legally, structural modifications like that require disclosure. Harris promised to look into permit records deeper than what was publicly available. By late afternoon, he called back. "There's no permit history for the basement modification," he said, "but there is something else." I waited. The previous owners filed 3 noise complaints in the 2 years before they sold the property. What kind of noise? Scratching in the walls, footsteps at night reported twice. The 3rd time they canceled the complaint before deputies arrived. A cold wave moved through me. "They knew," I said quietly. "Possibly," Harris replied. "We had only one neighbor within visible distance, an older rancher named Dale. I walked over that evening while deputies were still occasionally patrolling. Dale leaned against his fence as I explained everything. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "They kept to themselves," he said. "But about a year before they left, I saw someone out near their shed one night." "What did he look like?" "Couldn't see his face. Tall, thin, figured it was family." He paused. "Thing is," I waved. He didn't wave back, just stood there. "How long?" "Long enough that it felt wrong." 3 nights passed quietly, too quietly. No attic sounds, no cellar disturbance, no movement alerts. It almost felt staged, like he wanted us to lower our guard. On the 4th night, the power went out. Not the whole house. Just the upstairs. Exactly like the breaker issue weeks earlier. My chest tightened instantly. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the panel in the basement. The breaker wasn't tripped. The wiring had been cut. Clean cut. Inside the wall cavity, accessible from the hidden shaft. He hadn't just been watching. He'd been preparing, testing the house's systems, learning them. When I turned back toward the metal room, something stopped me cold. The tool chest I'd placed in front of the door had been moved again. Not shoved violently, repositioned carefully. On the concrete floor beside it was something new. A photograph, face down. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was Nora, standing at the kitchen sink that morning, taken from inside the house. Close, very close. On the back of the photograph, written in black marker, were 3 words, "I live here." My vision blurred. This wasn't surveillance anymore. This was a statement. I didn't call the police immediately. I don't know why. Maybe anger finally overrode fear. Maybe I wanted answers. I stepped into the metal room slowly. Flashlight steady, empty walls, bare concrete. But something felt different. The air felt warmer, occupied. I turned slowly toward the narrow staircase door. It was slightly open, just an inch, enough to show darkness beyond. And then I heard it, a slow exhale, from behind me. I spun around. He was standing in the doorway of the metal room. I hadn't heard him enter. Tall, thin, late 30s maybe, unshaven, eyes wide but calm, not frantic, not wild, focused. He held nothing in his hands, no weapon, just stood there. "You weren't supposed to open it," he said quietly. His voice was steady, like we were discussing a broken appliance. "This isn't your house," I said. He tilted his head slightly. It was first. The sentence didn't make sense. "Who are you?" I demanded. He glanced toward the staircase, then back at me. "They let me stay," he said. "Who did?" He smiled faintly. "The ones before you." My blood ran cold. "They sold the house. They left," he corrected. A sound behind me. Nora, screaming upstairs. The man's expression shifted instantly. Not panic, annoyance. He moved fast, faster than I expected. He lunged past me toward the staircase. I grabbed his arm. He twisted sharply, slamming his elbow into my ribs. The force knocked the air out of me. He didn't try to attack. He tried to escape. Again. I tackled him halfway up the narrow steps. We crashed into the wooden railing. It splintered. We both fell back into the metal room. My head hit concrete, Stars exploded in my vision. By the time I regained focus, he was already at the exterior cellar door. He looked back once, not afraid, almost disappointed. Then he was gone. Police arrived within minutes of Nora's call. This time, they found something. A small camp hidden deep in the tree line, plastic tarp, food wrappers, water jugs, and dozens of photographs. All of us, from different angles, different times of day. The detective's voice was quieter when he spoke to me afterward. "He's been here a long time," Harris said. "How long?" He hesitated. "We found photos of the previous owners, too." My stomach dropped. "How far back?" "Years." And that's when I understood the full truth. We hadn't bought an empty house. We had inherited a tenant. One the previous owners had chosen not to confront. One they had quietly lived with, until they finally decided to run. And now, he believed we had taken something that belonged to him. The house never felt safe again, even with the deputies parked outside, even with the cameras installed. It wasn't just him moving through the walls or the attic anymore. It was the idea that he could be anywhere, at any moment, inside a house we thought was ours. The week after the attack, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper of wind made my pulse spike. Atlas refused to settle, growling at walls, doors, shadows. Nora barely left my side. I spent hours going over blueprints, rechecking every hidden cavity. I even measured ceiling heights to see if he could have built tunnels inside walls I hadn't noticed. But every time I thought I had found every possible access point, a new gap appeared in my calculations. It was as if the house itself had secrets, and he knew every single one. Detective Harris called me late one night. "I found something," he said quietly. "What?" "The previous owners. They were keeping him here intentionally." My stomach tightened. "How? Why?" "There's no record of criminal charges against him, but he had a history. Mental instability, obsessions with houses he could inhabit. He worked construction, knew wiring, walls, layouts. The previous owners apparently knew this, and instead of confronting him, they allowed him to stay. They created the metal room and shaft access, so he could live here, secretly." I froze. "They let him live under the house?" "Yes. And you triggered his awareness. He's territorial. He doesn't leave easily. He only moves when he wants to." I sank into a chair. My brain was spinning. "You mean he's been planning this for months? Years, maybe," Harris said. "You just became the new inhabitants." That very night, at 1:12 a.m., the motion alert from the hallway camera went off. This time I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a bat, Atlas at my side, and crept toward the basement door. The metal room was silent, empty, but the air smelled different. Then, a sound from above, a heavy creak in the attic floorboards. I grabbed the ladder and climbed, Atlas following. The panel was open. He had returned, slow, deliberate, footsteps across the wooden beams. I shined my flashlight. Nothing. Then he dropped, straight into the hidden shaft. I heard him land in the basement. My heart skipped. He was faster than I thought possible. I followed, bat ready. Nora stayed behind, phone in hand, ready to call. The basement was dark, the metal room door wide open. The cot, the bottles, the photographs, they were back, all of it. He sat in the chair in the center, facing the wall. I stepped forward. "Who are you?" I demanded. He turned slowly. Thin face, sharp cheekbones, eyes cold, unblinking. "You live here," I said, voice shaking. "I have lived here," he replied softly. "And the previous owners. They knew," he said. "They always knew." Something inside me snapped. I stepped closer. "Then leave," I shouted. "Go somewhere else. This isn't yours anymore." He tilted his head, calm, controlled. "You are intruding," he said. "This is my domain. You live above me. I watch, I wait, I understand. You cannot leave. I swung the bat. He dodged effortlessly. He moved like he had been practicing this for years inside walls and shafts. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he vanished down the cellar staircase toward the exterior exit. I chased him, but he was gone. Outside, nothing. The night air was silent. Too silent. Nora called the police. They arrived in minutes. We swept the property again. The exterior cellar doors were open. The chain had been removed, clean cuts, professional. The previous owners were unreachable, disconnected, no forwarding address. Detective Harris was grim. "He's smart," he said. "He won't leave until you force him out, and you can't force him out without confronting him." I asked, "What do we do?" He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "Prepare. He will return. He knows you know now. He won't stop." That night I slept with every light in the house on. Your Atlas slept near the bedroom door, growling softly. Around 2 a.m., I heard the soft shuffling of feet. Not fast, not frantic, deliberate, from the attic, from the walls. I grabbed my bat, flashlight in the other hand, and called out. "Show yourself!" He emerged from the metal room doorway. The same calm, cold expression. "You know now," he said. "You understand. I live here." I swung the bat. He dodged. He was almost dancing between the shadows. Then, without warning, he lunged for the cellar entrance. I blocked him. He froze for a second. "You won't leave," I said. "I never do," he whispered. At that moment, Detective Harris and 2 deputies burst in. He froze completely. "You brought backup," he said, almost impressed. They cornered him. He didn't resist, not violently. He just let himself be taken. He was removed. A psychiatric evaluation. Charges pending. The metal room, secured, reinforced, removed access entirely. We installed cameras in every room, every wall, every hidden cavity. Atlas finally slept in peace. Nora and I moved some of our furniture. Lights stayed on timers. Locks double-checked. The house felt safe again. But every now and then when I pass a wall or hear the attic creak, I feel it. The memory of a man who had lived beneath us, watching, waiting, understanding. And I know, deep down, somewhere, he still remembers us.